yeah, bro, you gotta know who you are, bro. And it's like, that's impossible because you actually can't. You cannot know yourself in that way. And paradoxically, you can have a strong sense of self to the extent that you release any knowledge about yourself.
He was a writer, he was a poet, he was a musician, he was a husband, he was a father, he was a provider, he was a depressed guy. He did everything. He was a Zen Buddhist, he was a Jew, he did the things, he was the things. And then we realized, oh fuck, I need 10 bottles of wine to cope with this identity. So I have to move on.
If you know yourself, then you know that you actually don't know yourself, and vice versa. And the problem is when you introduce the lie, that the lie is the actual attempt to know yourself in a hubristic way, which is basically to choose who you are. And that creates the contrary, that creates you being completely oblivious to who you truly are.
All identity is fake, and you don't not knowing formlessness. This is so incredibly available to us in our culture. These ideas, you can pick them up so easily. So you can discover this idea, and you can force it or pretend that you already understand it. And I see this happening way more than people getting lost in their temporary identity.
I've seen many times online some usually like a dating guru type of guy, and they literally say like, "Yeah, bro, you gotta know who you are, bro," and it's like, that's impossible. Like, and I don't mean to be mean to them, but it's like, you idiots, like you're just falling flat into the feminine dark side, into the weird inversion there, because you actually can't. You cannot know yourself in that way. And paradoxically, you can have a strong sense of self to the extent that you release any knowledge about yourself. And that's how you really develop a strong, like a sense of self, so to speak. But you cannot know who you are. And certainly not like when you're going through the individuation process, right? Like it's like you maybe know things about yourself, like, oh, I like nutella ice cream more than vanilla ice cream. Okay, fine, but that's, you cannot know who you are, and this is immediately verifiable because nobody who would you would ask that question like, who are you? Like you actually cannot answer that question except in a very specific scope, in the sense that if I'm a plumber and I go to your house and then your brother looks at me and he doesn't know that the plumber is coming, and then he asks me, who are you? And that's a proper question. It would make sense. And then I would tell him I'm the plumber. And then the question is satisfied. It makes sense. But if you ask in general to a person, who are you? It's actually impossible to answer that question. Anybody can try it. You cannot answer it. So, and what this dating gurus are doing is basically the blind leading the blind, because the moment that you choose an answer to the question, who are you, you are committing the original act of hubris. It's like that's the beginning of going down to hell.
There is a kind of positive knowing
Yes.
in this. Socrates said, I know that I know nothing, blah, blah, blah.
Exactly.
This is what you're getting at. But there is also, you have said about yourself sometime, I am the guardian dog of Europe, right?
Right.
And I think it feels right, that suits you. I see that what you are doing is what a guardian dog of Europe would
Right.
do. So I think this is it's of course a relative identity. When you die, there is no Europe anymore,
Yeah.
or you can't use it for everything. But
Right.
um,
But the
there
thing is that
is. there is, you can say stuff or that is true
Yes,
nonetheless, even though it's
yes,
unknowable.
exactly. But
It's also knowable at the same time. The unknowable is knowable in a weird way.
right, yeah, but it's always when you say something concrete, it's always with a particular context, right? And you only get to realize those things if you have the not knowing knowledge, if you have the awareness that you do not know yourself, and that's actually perfectly fine because that's the normal state of affairs, because you cannot know the knower. Then then of course you can notice things. You can notice that you like Nutella ice cream more than vanilla, and that you uh, don't like, in my case, the fact that Europe is being destroyed, and I come from a place where people, for some reason, think that it's better in certain ways and it's not, and blah 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 blah. And then I feel like this garden dog. So, but again,
But isn't also, if you know, you can also invert this. So you can only know what you are when when you know that you can't know, or something like that. You can only know things when you know that you don't know. But you can also completely invert it, as in, you can only know that you don't know when you know yourself, in a way. So the inverse is also true.
yeah, it could be in the
um
sense that knowing yourself means that you know that you don't know, right? And knowing that you
ah,
don't know means that you know yourself.
I don't know. I I'm quite alone in this, but I have a sort of gripe with the spiritual knowledge. The spiritual people of the past would always emphasize this, right? The not knowing, the you are nothing, you are, always
Yeah,
this part. But I
but they will
don't
also
think.
emphasize the know yourself part. They will also say that sometimes, like even the famous
Yes,
Greek
but there
stuff.
seems to be a sort of bias, at least in how it's spoken about, how it's used, as if the not knowing is somehow deeper or better or more primal than the knowing. But I disagree with that, I think. And they all emphasize this, all of them, the Buddha, the Eckhart Tolle. Uh, but I think it is a reaction to an. It was always a reaction to an overly masculine, patriarchal world, that these people emphasized the other side, the emptiness, the not knowing, the whatever. And so everyone was biased to the masculine all the time. Being so these sages would speak about, be more like the feminine, be more like the valley, be more like not knowing, because that was so rare. And nowadays we live in a more feminine oriented society since the 60s. And I don't, I think now the other side, for the first time ever, needs to be more emphasized. So, in a way, knowing is more important right now. Not really, not deeply. Deeply, they're equal, I believe. But in the context of not knowing being the norm, um, knowing should be emphasized more and should be compensated more. And I know you describe the society as too much biased towards knowing, and they need uh, less knowing. They need
Well,
more not knowing. But
the things that
I don't know. I think the society in general is biased to not knowing. I mean, we are in the first time ever in history where society doesn't know where it's going, doesn't feel a need to. In the past, we knew where we're going. It was diluted often, right? The Third Reich or Napoleon or whatever, or the church. People always had goals that the society, and often those goals were not very good, but they were always masculinely oriented. And now that's not the case at all. So it creates some weird compensations. I think that your grip with the people say you got to know who you are, the dating guru people, you take issue with the fake knowing, the fake masculinity of them. So you emphasize the feminine side more. But I think these guys that do the fake masculinity, the fake knowing, are sort of agents of the feminine, are sort of byproduct of the feminine dominance in a way. And
Right.
they're not an independent force. I think the main force is the societal dominance of not knowing. But I'm quite alone in I don't know anyone that dares to go against all the spiritual knowledge of the past, where they emphasize it's even in the Tao Te Ching, right? The Lao Tzu
Yeah.
says, "Be more like the valley, like the feminine." And I don't know if that right now that is what you should do. I
Well, the thing is that
I guess that's knowing, having an identity, because it's also much harder. I find it much harder in this society to have a real proper identity in the world, to even the temporary relative identity is way more difficult for me than to feel I am nobody. I don't have a purpose. That this is so strong. It's put if I say I am nobody, I don't have a purpose, people around me will agree with me. And I hear more often that your temporary positive identity of plumber or guardian dog, I hear more often that this is actually a fake identity than that I hear that the not knowing is a fake identity. So it feels like it's inverted compared to those times.
I think all that gets solved in a sense that when you introduce the fact of the lie, of the truth and the lie, this is like, I think all those wise people from everywhere on earth were saying that thing simply because it's just the truth. It's like almost an objective fact. One of the versions of that made me see it more clearly and very simple in simple terms is that I think it came from a Chinese proverb that says something like that you couldn't know yourself in the same way that you cannot taste your own tongue or see your own eyes or hear your own ears or touch your own fingers. I mean, you could touch the fingers of the other hand, but you cannot touch this finger with this finger, right? So it's actually very logical and obvious. Like you cannot actually know yourself in that way. However, there is this weird paradoxical thing that when you become aware of that without fear or judgment or anything, then you actually know yourself. And then you do know yourself even in a, like you could say, like with a strong sense of self. Like you do have like a strong sense of self, so to speak.
Yes, but the
So
direction here is first not know yourself and then you will know yourself. But I think it works the other way around
I think
just
they're
as
both
well.
together. Yes, I think they're both together. But as
If
I was
if
saying,
you say I'm a plumber, I'm a man, I am a guardian dog, I am this, I am that. If you really do those those temporary fake identity things, if you really do them well and really understand well what, then you will discover, oh wait, actually I am nothing in a way,
Yes,
but you can
100%.
also go first, I am nothing, oh actually I am something. I
I think they
You
happen.
can go
They
either side, you can
Yes, I
approach
think
it
they
from.
happen together always. They happen together. I'm not sure if there's an order. Maybe there is. I don't know. But I think they happen together. Like if you know yourself, then you know that you actually don't know yourself, and vice versa. And the problem is when you introduce the lie. That the lie is the actual attempt to know yourself in a hubristic way, which is basically to choose who you are. And that creates the contrary. That creates you being completely oblivious to who you truly are. And that's where we're at in the modern world. Because and you can see it, like, I mean, they literally say it with this video sometimes. Yeah, no, know who you are. Like, you have to be this and that. It's like, and what you said is actually way better, which has to do also with the idea of the matrix and stuff. That is like, if you just do your simple interfaces, if you are actually fully just the plumber or just the whatever, the boyfriend or the girlfriend or whatever, then you also reach that type of not knowingness that is true knowingness.
Yes, yes.
So it's
And yeah, for some reason I want this emphasized more, because the other side has been said since Socrates. It has been said by everyone. We know it now, and we see people the do the spiritual bypass, right? They know, because the idea that all identity is fake and you don't not knowing and blah blah blah, formlessness, this is so incredibly available to us in our culture. You can These ideas, you can pick them up so easily, so you can discover this idea and you can sort of force it or pretend that you already understand it. And I see this happening way more than people getting lost in their temporary identity. And a very good
yes,
example of this is Leonard Cohen. Um, he had a quote where he said something when he was a bit older. He said, yeah, with all my years of experience and suffering or whatever, I've always been looking for some identity or whatever, and I realized that there is no stable identity or whatever. And but in the way he said it, and I could sense he actually tried. He was a writer, he was a poet, he was a musician, he was a husband, he was a father, he was a provider, he was a depressed guy. He did everything. He was a Zen Buddhist. He was a Jew. He did everything, and he really went looking, in a way, in a sincere way, not in a lie way, but in a sincere way, for a real positive identity. And he struggled in that, and then he opened in a way, and he understood more and realized the instability of that sort of stuff. But that's so different how he did. He was very masculine in it, and he did the things. He was the things. And then we realized, oh fuck, I need 10 bottles of wine to cope with this identity, so I have to move on. And he gets another one. And um, on the other side, you can say, when you're like 14, you read one spiritual book and, oh, identity is formless, and you can just say it and sort of pretend you know it. And I see this mistake happening. Yeah, I see this happening too much. And I want people more to just say, I am the plumber, I am the man. I am very simple thing, and I actually am that. And then they
Right.
will discover. For example,
Right.
Andrew
But
Tate has a very narrow identity. I think, right? He is very, he knows what he is. He thinks, right, and he's vocal about it. And well, I think that what he is, he does to the fullest. He does it well. He's not a bad one for what he thinks he is. But you see, he's running into problems. He's getting thrown in jail. His relevancy is fading. So his identity is getting pressured, and this happens automatically. And I want this to happen because he will grow. His new identity will be even more strong and even more this blah 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 better. But I prefer that so much for this era of history over if Andrew Tate was some spiritual guy who identified with everything in the ocean. And I think his path is sort of better in the, not objectively, but in the current relative
yes,
world we're living in.
yes. I mean, again, I don't separate the two because they either go healthy together or healthy together. Because I could also argue, which is I think is the case, that nowadays you also see this non-identity aspect, but in the negative way, all over the place, right? It's like again, like nobody even knows what dating means nowadays anymore. Mostly comes from the dark side of the feminine, in which they don't want to tell you what they are because it's more convenient for them to be able to lie. So they prefer to use the not knowing aspect, but it's a lie. It's not the actual one because the actual one comes with the knowing, with the simple knowing, and then yeah, all this idea of escaping the matrix, which I guess Andrew Tate also popularized it, which I understand I mean, in our current situation, I think he has the right, generally speaking, he probably has the right approach to it. But there's something that gets ignored about it that for me is way more important, which is like the actual real escape in the matrix is basically what you said to me a couple of minutes ago, which is like just simply actually be whatever you're being. The student, if you're going to college, then just be actually truthfully be the college student, because that will call forth the heroic in you no matter what, especially nowadays. Because if you actually are, for example, the college student, and then you sincerely are there to learn and to learn to think, and one day you're sitting there and this HR lady comes into the classroom and she announces that, you know, you may not speak again about politics and religion, which is this is like a real example that I saw, and I'm sure that there's a lot of similar examples. Then if you're actually there as a student and sincerely there, then you probably will say something. You probably will do something about it. I mean, that's literally an opportunity for you to actually put into practice what you're learning, like to speak the truth or whatever it is, or to gather knowledge or whatever it is. Just as an example, right? So that's the actual escaping of the matrix, is doing the simple, the quote unquote boring job and then actually doing it. And then from that, sometimes it can happen that you realize that you actually, practically speaking, you might have to go away and do something else because maybe the whole hierarchy is corrupted and it's just practically done to stay there. That's perfectly reasonable thing to happen nowadays. But if you don't have the experience of doing that simple identity and actually doing it, then you'll never escape in the matrix, no matter how much like whatever you do.